all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos and friends, of course, all folks who love film, to talk about movies on this show. Of course, all with our own little gay slash queer bear twist. We've got not one, but two films to talk about with you this week. We are celebrating Japanese cinema with a review of Godzilla -1, as well as the newest Miyazaki film, The Boy and the Heron. So a lot of goodness, question mark, to talk about. We're going to get into it. We want to hear your thoughts as well. But before we do any of that, let me introduce you to my wonderful co-host. Jim Bugliafico is with us here in the virtual studio. Hey, sweetheart, how's it going?
It's going good. Wow, the lead up to this show is like a movie in itself. It was like a thriller, like a technological thriller. It was amazing. No, we had some bumps in the road getting here, but I'm glad to be here. We have two new movies to talk about that I'm super excited about. So, ready.
Awesome. Yeah, never fun to have technical issues when we're getting things rock and rolling. But after how many fucking years doing this, I think we've got it down to a science in terms of navigating our way through. And for the random listener, they're gonna have no idea that happened anyway.
Exactly.
Well, not now.
No. But now that we've told them it did, now they know.
But it got my adrenaline pumping for the show.
It did.
It did. Behind the curtain.
Got you excited. Also with us behind the curtain, now stepping in front of it, is the wonderful William Lindis. Hey, Will, how's it going?
Hey, Brad. Hey, Jim. Hey, listeners. Whatever before the show was before the show. We're here in the show right now. We're in the middle of big movie, good movie, prestige movie season, however you want to call that. So many things to watch, so many things to recommend, so many things to talk about. We got two exciting ones to talk about today. But before I really am ready for us to move there, I want to do some show and tell with you guys.
Yeah, we were talking about this before the show. And Will, if you could just kind of briefly give the setup context of this, and then show us what you got. That would be amazing.
So it turns out I like talking about movies. And one of my favorite places to do that is on a Facebook group called Cinematics with some friends of the show.
Uh-oh.
Oh.
Sorry. Can you back up a second,
yeah.
Will?
Yeah. All right. So as you guys know, one of the things I really love doing is talking about movies. Go figure, right? So I'm part of this Facebook group called Cinematics, which is both for a podcast and also a group of people. Several of our friends of the show, including Bruce and Hammy, have all kind of come from that group as well. But this year we did a Secret Santa, and we all exchanged gifts, little wish list items. And the one that I got was absolutely killer, and I want to show it off here on the show.
That is awesome.
So yes, this is a poster made by my friend Pete, who's also the host of the Middle Class Film Class podcast. He was in my Green Knight actual play podcast, which is up on our channel as well. And for those who are listening and not able to see it, it's this gorgeous handmade piece of art that is a bunch of like VHS like spines, all kind of cut out and designed into like a strip pattern, with the MBP logo right in the middle of it, beautifully framed. So this is going up on the wall. This is so fucking cool. Thank you, Pete. This absolutely made my day when this arrived in the mail.
Oh man, I'm blown away by that. That is, first of all, it's an awesome gesture. To put that much thought and effort into a gift like that, it makes it really special. And when you showed it to me, I'm like, that looks so cool. At first, I thought it almost looked like festival lanyards. You know what I mean? That's yeah. But when you said it was VHS spines, I'm like, oh, that's so amazing. Yeah, that's fantastic. You're lucky.
Way cool.
You must have been really good this year, Will.
I was a good boy this year. I did not get any coal. I was a good boy.
Oh, you were.
Oh goodness. Well, that's awesome, Pete. What a cool gift if you're listening.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Really, really neat. And Will, thanks so much for sharing that with us and with our audience. That's like a new MVP relic. Will, like
Yes.
go in the
Yeah.
museum someday, you know?
It's like it's going to be this. The Nebraska hat, I think, makes it into that.
Yes, it's got to,
that area.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're just going to start building out like the folklore around this podcast.
Oh, well, quickly approaching episode 500. That seems like the perfect time for it. This is episode 493. I think we're going to hit the big 500. Maybe a month and a half into the new year. We'll see. I don't know. Maybe it's longer than that. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But I'm going to have to come up with an item to put into the archive. Jim, we've got your Nebraska hat. We've got Will's MVP Secret Santa gift.
Brad, I would 100% volunteer the Thanos glove because it's the most like it stands out so much in your background. I mean, you have other things behind you that are recognizable, but that Thanos fist is always like fisted
That's
it
true.
up back there.
It's always ready for fisting time back there, right? So, ultimate power.
We'll put all these together in like a vault. We'll have like a Al Capone's, it'll be the MVP vault somewhere. We'll make a giant. Oh, that's what we'll do. We'll make like a giant geocache out of all our stuff. We'll put it like in a box,
nice,
bury it somewhere, and just have like these really off the wall clues. You know what I mean?
What we need to do, let's record an episode of this podcast that we do not release anywhere else. It's not going up on Libsyn. It's not going up through Apple Podcasts. This only exists for us. We put it on like a cassette tape and put it in the vault. The lost episode of MBP. That's what we're doing.
I love it. All right, we got a plan. This is going to happen. Good stuff. Well, speaking of stuff that's going to happen, we've got two big movies to talk about this week. And after taking some time off last week, I had some surgery. Will, you had some travel stuff going on. We're back in the saddle. We are excited to catch up with not one, but two films we've seen since we last recorded. And we're going to kick things off with Godzilla -1. And then a little bit later in the show, we'll move on to The Boy and the Heron. A lot to talk about. We're going to dig into it. As always on the Movie Bears podcast, though, we value your innocence if you haven't seen a film. A lot of other shows are like, well, we'll talk about it spoiler-free. And then they totally spoil the bejesus out of the thing. And you're like, wow, thanks. Fuck. We don't do that here. We're pretty serious about protecting you from spoilers. So for each film, we're going to talk totally spoiler-free for about 10 minutes or so. Then we will give you really big, obvious warnings when we're going to open things up to spoilers so that you can step away and do what you need to do to protect yourself. So just know that's a thing. Jim, Will, are you ready to get into our first movie?
So ready.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, then, all of that said, here we go. Our discussion of Godzilla -1. All right, Jim, you are absolutely the biggest Godzilla fan I know. And I know a lot of Godzilla fans, so that's saying something.
There are a lot of us.
Seems only fitting that you be the one to kick this segment of the show off. Very briefly and spoiler-free, as we promised. Give us a little bit of setup. What the heck is Godzilla -1? What was your experience like seeing it? What did you think of the movie?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to kick this off by saying, like, what a time to be alive, right? It's, like, even in this year, like only 2 years after a pandemic, we get like 2 films from Japan. Like, thank you, Japan, for gifting us with 2 new movies to talk about this week, first of all. And we'll find out, what we think of them, right? But like, we're so lucky to have films like this hitting our screens here in the US, I think. Yeah, absolutely. And this one, the first one we're going to talk about, of course, is Godzilla -1. And let me tell you a little bit from IMDb description what this movie is about. This is obviously a Godzilla movie, in case you haven't figured that out. Post-war Japan, meaning post-World War II, is at its lowest point when a new crisis emerges in the form of a giant monster baptized in the horrific power of the atomic bomb. So yeah, we have a new Godzilla movie. It's a Toho produced movie. As you know, Toho owns they are the kind of the godfather or grandfather or grandmother of kaiju movies from Japan, and they've given us a new Godzilla movie. The last one out of Toho was Shin Godzilla, if you remember that one. We talked about that on the show, I'm pretty sure. I think we all liked it a lot. And now we have Godzilla -1, which is not quite sure how it relates to Shin Godzilla. I view this movie as kind of I'll just say this without spoiling. I'll just say it feels like a reboot of Godzilla to me, or at least a partial reboot of Godzilla. Taking place immediately post World War II and the dropping of the atomic bomb. Or you could say that it's a sequel to Oppenheimer. Right. Either one would probably work. Man, I got to say, right off the bat, I love this film. Seen it twice now. And go figure, right? A Godzilla fan loves a Godzilla movie, right? I mean, but no, seriously, I think there's a lot of reasons to love this film. Not just because it's a Godzilla movie, but it's a high quality Godzilla movie. And we'll talk about some of the reasons why. It's written and directed by Takashi Yamazaki, a writer-director from Japan. I looked at his IMDb credits. Not sure I know a lot of the stuff. Will or somebody else might know a little bit more, but I don't. But man, has he blessed us with a great film. Saw this in the biggest format we have locally, which is, of course, the Limax or DFX or whatever you want to call it, which was great. Sound design in this film is fantastic. The visual effects are stunning. The representation of Godzilla in this film is fucking terrifying. And, gone are the silly antics of the Showa era Godzilla, where he's, jumping in the air, congratulating himself and, doing karate moves and things like that. This is a terrifying fucking giant monster, and that's what you get in this film. But not only that, we always talk about how these Godzilla movies have a human element that kind of sucks, and they focus on it, and we wish they didn't, and we walk away a little disappointed because, it just feels like we got cheated a little bit. But in this film, I think the human element or the human drama that is associated with the movie is perfect for a Godzilla movie. Not only because it's well done, it's well written, the characters are emotionally resonant and relatable and well acted, but the human story really ties in to the concept of Godzilla in probably the best way since maybe the first movie. And we could say that we are lucky enough, at least in my view, that we are living in a time where we've gotten maybe the best Godzilla movie since the original. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. So, yeah, I loved it. That's all I'm going to say for now. We'll let you guys talk about it, get into spoilers. But, yeah, I was blown away by it. Had to see it again. I know it's probably got a short theatrical run here in the U.S. It got very little, if any, marketing here in the U.S. I never saw one trailer in theaters for this. They might have done it in like someplace like Alamo. I don't know. They never did it in any of the chains here. I can guarantee you that. And never did see a trailer for it on TV either. It's a shame because I think there's a lot to like about this movie, and I think a lot of people will like it, even for a quote-unquote foreign film.
All right. Well, Jim, thank you so much for kind of detailing a little bit about the film. Definitely, interesting that it wasn't really marketed here in like the main chains that we go to. But Will, going to you, I'm very curious about your experience. I know you frequent the Alamo a lot. Was it something that they advertised or did some rah-rah around there? Talk to us about that if you don't mind, as well as your thoughts on the movie.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was some rah-rah here at the Alamo Draft House. Like I remember seeing some trailers for it. Now, some trailers. This wasn't one where it was like plastered in front of every movie or very heavily, heavily. But I saw it a couple of times, like
Hmm.
enough to where it was like I had some awareness of this film.
Mm.
Aside from just
YouTube.
seeing like the YouTube videos
Yeah.
and trailers from there. So I went into this one excited, mainly because I'm a big fan of Shin Godzilla. I have had a bit of a divergence with I've not been really able to connect with uh, the kind of the American like what
Warner Brothers, Monsterverse
yeah
stuff.
Mainly because for the most part I've not enjoyed the human characters in those too much, and so I both want to spend more time with the monsters, but at the same time then the monsters just have to brawl it out to fill up the space that's unoccupied by the human characters, so it leaves me wanting more. Shin Godzilla hit everything exactly the way I wanted it, and I would say Godzilla -1 even surpassed that. This is rarefied air. I would say that first of all, this is the second film of the Reiwa era, which is the sort of like the new era of Toho Godzilla movies, Shin Godzilla and this. And even though they're sort of different continuities or whatever, it's part of the same era of them making these movies. And they've both been like knock it out of the park films for me. The human characters are so damn good in this. I would have loved this movie if Godzilla wasn't even in it. So I want to start with that. I loved experiencing the characters, the conflict that the main character is going through based off of who he is, and some of the choices that he had to make early on in the film that got him to where he was, some of the shame that he carries, and some of the ways that that's rippled through his life. That would have been fine by itself. But the Godzilla sequences also kick ass. That's the thing. Like, whenever Godzilla is on screen, it's terrifying. It's scary. And they also withhold a lot of Godzilla. There are big portions of this movie that almost feel like Jaws, and not just because there's some sequences set at water, like, that's the obvious part of it, but because the anticipation of Godzilla is as terrifying as the appearance of Godzilla. And all of that, plus the score, they do some pretty cool things with the score here. There's this really recognizable, like the da 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 da. Like, you get to hear that, but there's also a few times where, especially kind of earlier in the film, where you start to hear a version of that and then it does something slightly different. And so it sort of made me feel like this fits because of kind of where it fits in the kind of the storyline or the timeline post World War II. We don't have like a billion Godzilla's attacks in the history of this world. This is kind of the beginning of it. This is the Godzilla theme sort of taking shape through the movie at the same time that Godzilla the threat is taking shape through the course of this movie. I love all of that. This is gosh, if you really like, Godzilla clawed in my head, I had to choose like the best Godzilla movie of all time for me. And having not seen a lot of the middle ones, so I can't say for sure the same way Jim would, I would pick this one. I think this one captured all of the things I like best about Gojira and Shin Godzilla, and then sprinkled in some new things as well. This is a very special movie. I'm so glad we got to see it. I'm so glad they extended the theatrical release so that people can see it. That may not have gotten a chance to during that sort of narrow 1 week window that was originally offered. This is just a killer movie. Go see it.
Will, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts as well. Glad to hear that this is a win for you. And you mentioned that limited release window. It's interesting. As Godzilla fans, obviously we were aware of this. And Will, Alamo sounds like they were doing some rah-rah, some marketing. But I think most people were not aware that a new Godzilla movie, at least on my social feeds, was coming. I saw a lot of people who went to theaters to see other things, and they're like, what is this Godzilla -1 thing that's playing? Is that like an old movie? And then they realized that it was a new fucking Toho Godzilla film, and they're fucking blitzed out of their mind to like go see it. And it's just, it's unfortunate that the word about this film, I guess, really didn't get out much ahead of time, at least here in the United States, in my experience. But I'm glad to see a lot of people finding it and flocking to it and enjoying it as much as they are. I know so many people who have seen it in the last week after they extended the run, and we just got news that they're extending the run again, and they're going to keep doing it as long as it's profitable, it sounds like. So that means more people see the movie. I think that's a big win. I won't talk too much about my thoughts because honestly, Jim, Will, you both pretty much said them. I think this is a fantastic Godzilla film. I don't think I was as big on Shin Godzilla as either of you guys were. His design was really weird, and they made some choices with the human characters that I didn't like, and having subtitles in 4 different directions on the screen at all times from like these government scenes. It was hard to follow. It was a bit of a mess for me. This felt like more of a return to form for Godzilla. I don't know if this is like a soft reboot, if it's a hard reboot. I don't know if there's going to be a sequel to this. I've heard the director wants to make one, but I don't know if Toho's going to want to do that. So I'm just judging it on what it is. Godzilla showing up, you know, it's back in the 50s or whatever, 40s, and judging it as its own thing. I think it was brilliant. The human stories in every Godzilla movie I've ever seen completely fail to capture me in any way, except for Bryan Cranston's stuff in the 2014 Godzilla, which I really liked. And then they got rid of him within like 30 minutes of that movie, you know? And I don't understand it. Head scratch, whatever. I do like some of the legendary, you know, MonsterVerse, whatever you want to call it, Godzilla films. But like this to me was Godzilla. Like this is what I have been looking for the last 20 years of Godzilla movies. Because for the first fucking time ever through a whole Godzilla movie, I cared about the human story. In fact, the human story was more resonant with me than I think like some other human dramas I've seen looking at my Letterboxd list all year. I was like, wow, really? A Godzilla movie has like a better emotional throughput drama line than fucking other stuff? Okay, that's a surprise. So really, really job well done with this. I will be honest, though, there are parts where the CGI is a little janky. The motion is a little weird. They had said that the budget for this was $15 million to make this movie. And the director recently came out and said, I wish it was that much. But to the best of my knowledge, didn't give an actual figure. So whether this was 15 million, whether it was 10 million, I don't know. But I've seen episodes of TV that cost $10 million to make that like didn't look as good as this movie. So huge props to the filmmakers and everybody involved working on such a small budget to create this. It's amazing.
Yeah, Brad, I want to say about the marketing thing. I bought a shirt for Godzilla -1 prior to the movie, so I was wearing it out a couple of times over, I think, the last week or so. And people say, "Oh man, I love your shirt. What is that?" And I said, "Oh, have you seen the new movie?" They're like, "This is a new Godzilla movie?" I'm like, "Yeah, go see it. It's Godzilla -1." Oh wow, I didn't know that. But just to make your point, like a lot of people just didn't know about it, and that's a shame. But yeah, the human characters here really make it, especially like I said, because well, we'll have to get into spoilers to talk about it.
I love the idea of Jim just sort of being the impromptu, unofficial Godzilla -1 street team, just like going up to people like, excuse me, good sir, can I interest you in learning a little bit more about the word of our Lord and Savior Godzilla?
Nice.
I'm proselytizing Godzilla.
You're gonna get fresh converts in the middle of the street.
That's amazing. Well, Jim, to your point, this is probably a really good place to go ahead and just transition to spoilers. We'll just say, if you haven't seen Godzilla -1 yet, do yourself a favor and see it before you listen to spoilers. Of course, you have the power to do whatever the fuck you want, but it's, you know, we all agree it's pretty amazing. So go check it out. But things are officially fair game as far as spoiler talk is concerned. We are going to spoil any and everything about the plot of this film as we think about it. So listen at your own peril. And hey, to the point that we've been making about the marketing for this movie, really good friend of the show, D Geek Will, is in the
Hey,
chat.
Will.
Hey, Will. He's got an amazing YouTube channel. That's D Geek Will. Make sure you check it out. It's amazing. It's awesome. I already said amazing. That's how amazing it is. But Will says, I didn't hear about it till the second trailer just a few weeks before the movie came out. And Will, I mean, you got a trailer. I think a lot of people didn't even get that.
Yeah, he may
So
mean he saw it on YouTube.
maybe,
I-
maybe,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
possible.
my guess is that he only picked it up on YouTube, or maybe I even told him about it. I don't know.
I don't know, but I mean, the point stands, regardless of what happened, right? The
Yeah,
marketing for this here wasn't, I guess, very, very
Yeah.
pointed. I
Yeah.
don't even know that they tried. You know what I mean?
Well, and then when I think about it, it's like they probably could have put a trailer together. So here's the thing: American audiences a lot of times will not go for foreign subtitled only films. And that's what this was, right?
Mhm.
Unfortunately, it's a Japanese Godzilla movie. As far as I know, there is not a dubbed version out there for it, which will come up later when we talk about another movie.
Yeah.
But so they would have to have made a special U.S. trailer cinema cut for it that maybe didn't have any dialogue in it, because you know how they do that sometimes to kind of fool the audience into thinking, oh, this is not a foreign film.
Right.
Then people show up and say, what the hell is this? I got to read, which I don't agree with any of that. But the way the dialogue was handled in this was so good. This was not every. There wasn't a lot of extraneous talking in this, right? It was, as opposed to Shin Godzilla, which had a ton of it, right? This one really is to the point, direct, and not that much. If you're worried about subtitles, I would say don't let that be a barrier to see the film.
And maybe to that point, like, I think there's a lot of films that once you sort of peel back the inhibitions about subtitles, there's a whole world of movies that are opened up for you. But sometimes you need sort of like that gateway drug for it, right? To sort of like ease yourself in. And I think this is one of those, right? Because like you mentioned, it's not that it's dialogue light, it's that it's not exposition heavy. And so the dialogue that happens is pretty easy to pick up on. And of course, there's big action sequences. So there's times when, you're not paying attention to the subtitles. So I think this is a really good, like, primer, like getting a little bit better and more used to reading subtitles and then seeing where that takes you from there. And I think that's amazing too.
Yeah. We had spoilers now, yeah?
We sure as fuck are.
Okay,
Spoil
cool.
it.
So you mentioned Jaws earlier. Obviously, that was the first thing I thought of. They're out on the boat. Obviously, I think this writer-director, heavily influenced by Steven Spielberg films. Maybe not just Jaws, but certainly Jaws. Like the way this crew got together on this like mine-sweeping boat that they were put onto, and how they're like a ragtag collection of different guys that got together to go do this job. That is straight out of the Jaws film. And then of course there's an action sequence where they use mines to try to destroy Godzilla by having him put one in his mouth and then shooting it with a gun, which, spoilers for Jaws, that's like the end of Jaws.
What?
So yeah, sorry. But that was just so cool. Without going over that line, I don't think this film like really did a great homage to Jaws in that kind of beginning sequence.
Yeah. Well, even beyond just that sequence, there's a lot of Spielberg-esque shots in this movie. I don't know if you noticed it, but like certain scenes where like they'll film down at somebody like looking up, and the way the camera will kind of like swoop down and then like up on them, or like Dutch angles, or like, I mean, I see Spielberg DNA like all over this, not in like a we're stealing it and making it like all ours, but more of like a kind of a love letter. Kind of neat to get a Spielbergian Godzilla flavor.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what this film does so well, because when you're making a Godzilla movie in 2023 and this is the I don't know, Jim, how many entries are there in this franchise at this point?
Like 37.
Like 37. Okay, so you've got 37 of these films created by a ton of different directors from several different points of view, several different countries of origin, through different production companies, even animated series. The idea that Godzilla is both a destructive godlike creature and also heroic eco fighter, and also is great, like
friend of little boys,
fantastic as a cereal box mascot. Godzilla does all of these different things. This film was able to find a way of distilling what works best about a specific type of Godzilla. This like destructive godlike Godzilla, this force of nature, this thing that is sort of like an inevitable juggernaut kind of pushing towards humanity and crushing through it without feeling derivative. Even some of the homage things, which make us feel as though like, okay, yeah, there's definitely some influence of this. They feel like they borrow some of the good pieces, but weave it into something new instead of just feeling like a rehash. And that's what's exciting here. Like, Godzilla smashes up a city while the people fight it. That's the log line. That's not anything new or fresh or original, but when you see the way it's actually executed, it feels revitalizing.
Yeah, he's on a mission. He's just not even really on a mission. He's just out there destroying shit. Like, he's assume. It's funny. I don't think the movie actually mentions the actual atom bomb in this film. If you watch a film, it doesn't. It mentions the firebombing of some of these cities, right, that happened during the war, but it doesn't mention, as far as I know, it doesn't mention the actual atom bomb or hydrogen bomb of Nagasaki or Hiroshima.
We do.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we do see
Bikini Atoll.
Yes, we do see Bikini Atoll.
Right.
And I remember mentions of like the American bombing, but I don't know that it was specifically called an atomic bombing. So
right. Yep. Yeah. So that, I thought that was interesting. And the movie's timeline doesn't say, okay, this is, there's a scene at the beginning, which is also terrifying, where kind of mini Godzilla, he's not really super irradiated yet, like totally destroys this island outpost during the war that was there to maintain the fleet of kamikaze planes, or the Japanese fleet. And it's just, that's our first introduction to this Godzilla. And little do we know at that time that it's really just a smaller version of the monster that we're going to see later, who becomes gargantuan and even more terrifying. But that scene is fantastic.
And that scene happens in 1945, by the way. So the original Godzilla film was set in 54, but this is 45. So this is even more closely related to the bombing, at least in time, Steve, even without necessarily a direct mention. So
well, there's something kind of neat about that opening sequence too, where that plays so heavily into the themes, right? Because this is the sequence where everyone except for our protagonist, this kamikaze pilot who basically faked a damaged plane, mechanical issue, so that he wouldn't have to fulfill his mission and die. And while he's at this repair island, everyone gets killed more or less except for him and this engineer. But there's a moment where he could have fired a gun and ostensibly again. Well, yeah, he could have, at least according to the film's logic, we don't know whether for sure or not, but there's a good chance he could have killed Godzilla right then and there and saved everything that came afterwards. So he's haunted by his cowardice. That's the thing that carries through with him, and what makes him, when he chooses to sort of become the hero towards the back end of this, the fact all of those deaths, which he accounts as being, him being responsible for, he is avenging them personally. I think that's a cool way of looking at this film, seeing someone who has a personal score to settle both with himself his own history and with the monster itself, and seeing how those two stories weave in and out of each other.
It's also an interesting take on the human condition, I think, in terms of assumed guilt. I know that there was a line where the mechanic guy was like, a 20 millimeter gun can kill anything, but like, there's no way the gun in that plane would have like outright killed Godzilla, even in his mini form on that island. And so I think that yes, obviously there's some guilt, and the engineer kind of foists that on the main character and is like, it's your fault because you didn't fire the gun. I think if he tried to fire the gun, it wouldn't have stopped him anyway. But it sets up this beautiful like redemptive arc for this character.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That I think if we didn't have that, like the movie would have been 10 times less interesting, right? And one of my complaints with the film, it's why I didn't give it a full 5 stars on Letterboxd. Spoiler alert, it's not a full 5. # full 5. This movie, it does two things. One, it gives him an ejection seat, so he gets to live at the end. I mean, I guess that's cool, but it kind of takes away from the sacrifice. And then two, the female love interest character, we think she dies about halfway, 2/3 through the film. Turns out, nope, just kidding. She's somehow still alive in the hospital.
Yeah.
Telegram arrives, they're reunited at the end of the movie. I almost wish that those two characters had stayed dead. That would have been much more poignant for me, and I think would have pushed me to a 5. That said, maybe they're going to do more with those characters in another movie. I don't know, but that's just my.
Yeah. We're in spoilers, so there is kind of a hint right at the very end of the movie that hints that something is going on with Noriko. Is that her name?
Noriko.
I think Noriko.
Yeah.
Noriko. Mm-hmm. Something is going on there. But you're right. I think it would have been a more poetic, I guess, ending if he was able to complete his mission as a kamikaze pilot and give his life for the good, for saving Japan and his country and his cities, against this monster. The movie kind of fakes us out a little bit about that, right? It which is kind of cool in the way it does it. Obviously, the second time around, you know what's going to happen, but the first time, it's like, oh shit, there he is. He popped out of the plane. But I didn't mind that so much. But I wonder if that stuff is kind of cultural for Japanese films, for its heroes not like paying the ultimate. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe not. I'm just guessing. Or maybe the director or writer thought, oh, this is what a wider audience would probably more react to, is that the hero lives at the end, and so does his life partner, or whatever.
I think there is something cultural here, but it's a little different. This movie has something pretty poignant and political within sort of like Japanese history to say about sort of it's condemning the disposability of human life, right? It's basically saying like that we took all of these pilots and said the only way for you to be valuable is for you to fly and die. And we all considered you to be a coward if you didn't fly and die. And he has to deal with all of that. But between him and the engineer, we're able to see actually there is value in human life. We don't have to sacrifice and throw ourselves away. Right. We can protect. And so that's why I think the ending for me did land as poignant. Now, the wife, the Noriko situation is sort of different from that theme. I could have kind of made or break either way on that one. I don't think her living or dying kind of does much to that theme, but I'm glad that he lived, because I think that it made it to where it wasn't like he failed his mission and now has to complete it, and more that I think he found value in his own life, even all of these years later, through not dying. And that's it's a weird way to put it, but I think there's something that really struck strong for me. There's something very persevering about that, and something very uplifting about that.
Mm-hmm. And I think that was one of the strongest things in the film, where toward the end, the one person who probably had the most strong will or resentment against our hero, right, was I forget what his name was, Itachiban or something like that. The crew
Tachibana.
chief.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tachibana, the crew chief who came back in, fixed up the plane, got him ready to go. And here's the guy who probably had the most ill will toward our characters, getting to live. He says he showed him the ejector handle and stuff, which happened off screen or happened later. And he says to him, I think it was him that says, "Now go and live," right?
Right.
Or somebody said it
Yeah.
at the end, which was a very emotionally resonant, Will, to your point, part of the film, which I thought was really well done.
Yeah. It's interesting how they show that moment after the ejection happens. And we
Yes,
see
right.
that Koichi is okay, right? Then we cut to that and we see that happening. I didn't make the movie, but I almost feel like if they were going to go that route, they should have just showed us that up front. And for me, like seeing Koichi like decide to live in the moment might have been more impactful. But that's not the movie that was made. And
I think they wanted to fake us out with a little
I think so
extra
too.
drama.
I just, whatever. It didn't make it to a 5 for me for that reason. You probably don't care, movie creators, and that's totally fine. But that's why movies are subjective, right? We do have a question though in the live chat from Will, and very much want to talk about this before we shift over to our other movie. This is actually something I didn't notice the first time Jim mentioned it to me. He saw it in the film, and I'm like, "What the fuck are you talking about? I didn't see that." But as Will calls out, there is a black spreading like thing on Noriko's neck at the very end when she is sort of embracing Koichi in the hospital. I didn't see it the first time, but the second time we saw the movie, I was watching for it. I don't know how I fucking missed it, guys. It seemed as plain as day. There it was. So I know that they mentioned earlier in the film that they were kind of cordoning an area off because there was like some, they called it collecting shards of Godzilla. So did she maybe get bathed
after an attack
in like Godzilla matter that like healed her or something? Is she going to become Godzilla? I don't know.
We don't know, but that certainly sounds like the most logical reason. Like after the attack on Ginja, I guess they did make a point of mentioning, be careful, there's shards of Godzilla material all over the place. This is after we see her presumably get swept away and killed.
Right.
So we think she's succumbed to the attack. And they just kind of mention it, and then nothing is said of it after that. And then in the hospital, it shows her with this thing on her neck. And Brad, I think the reason why you might have missed it is she's in the hospital with injuries. I mean, it could have been mistake. You could have glanced at it and said, "Oh, it's just part of her injuries."
Mm-hmm.
But the growing thing kind of was very subtle, I think. At the end.
Yeah.
And I'm like, holy shit! So we'll see what they're going to do with that, if they do anything with it, or if it's just a thing they put in there. But who knows? Maybe she'll be Mechagodzilla in the next movie. I don't know.
There's two ways they can go with it, and I think both are pretty valid. And but these are pretty stark, right? You can either go like piece of Godzilla, and it's some sort of like sets up some sort of additional lore thing, whether it be, irradiated human becomes Godzilla, irradiated human senses Godzilla. There's so many different ways you can do stuff like that. The other way you could take this is, if we're really still playing with sort of like the nuclear bomb metaphor, like one of the things that was a part of Hiroshima Nagasaki was, the damage and the harm wasn't just from the blast, it was from the radiation and from, and so there is a story to be told potentially about that, like this radiation from this nuclear analog is now still going to have ripple effects and still continue to cause harm. There might be something about that here too. Those are two very different stories. One becomes very fantastical. One becomes a little darker and more metaphorical. I think both are valid ways to take this, as long as you do it well. I don't know. I can't speculate. I'm interested in seeing what comes of it.
Yeah, if they do end up getting a sequel greenlit, I'm very curious what's going to happen. I hope it's not in the vein of some of the older Toho Godzilla films where like a human gets exposed to something or or is special in some way and can like psychically commune with Godzilla. That's my fear here, is that whatever this matter is, like she's going to be standing on a top of a building and she's going to be like, Godzilla, hear my voice. That would be a little crazy and silly. Hopefully they keep it pretty grounded. Maybe she's just going to die of a Godzilla infection and that's all it is.
Yeah.
We don't know.
And then
we don't know.
Study her body.
Yeah. So.
I just want to, I know we're long on time and I'm sorry, but I just want to mention a couple more things that really like impressed me about the creature. There's a scene where he's in the city, he's rampaging, and he felt to me like at one point he's surrounded by buildings and he's just like whipping around. It's like a Tasmanian devil in a cage at some point. Like he just doesn't care. Like he's like tackling buildings and swooshing his tail around and just knocking stuff out. And then that atomic breath scenes,
oh my god,
were like insanely well done.
Yeah.
Like knock you back in your seat kind of stuff between the visual effects and the sound design were, I mean, it was like an atomic explosion. It wasn't just like, heat ray and people melt. It was like a fucking atomic explosion. So
yeah,
that was incredible.
More
for a movie that with that budget.
More damage from Godzilla's atomic fire breath bombs probably than the bombs that were dropped. Maybe Godzilla did that like 5 times. So like, that's a lot of destruction.
And it had kind of that, and I say this in a good way, in like the best way possible. There were some of those destruction scenes where Godzilla felt like a dude in a suit. And this is a franchise that's built around like a dude in a suit smashing like models, right? So there were moments during some of the destruction scenes that still kind of had that energy, but without looking like too chintzy or anything like that. Like I thought that was really cool. Like I think that there's sometimes a tendency to like over CGI some of these monsters, and I feel like I know that the director would probably disagree with me on this, but I feel like some of the budget restrictions may have actually been like a blessing more so than anything else. I think sometimes too much budget can get away from filmmakers. And in this case, they had to be smart and economical with their decisions. And the result was a smart, economical film.
Yep. Yeah. Completely agree.
Yeah. All that stuff felt really visceral, like to me, like watching it, as opposed to a giant CGI fest, of Godzilla versus Kong, where you didn't really, I don't know, the impact was, I mean, there's more action. There's 2 monsters on the screen banging the shit out of each other.
No. But I want to go back to what you almost said.
Banging each other? No, not happening. But yeah, I just felt it more viscerally in this movie than I did in either of any of the the Warner Brothers. I think it's Warner Brothers MonsterVerse ones.
Indeed. Well, we'll have to see what happens with Toho Godzilla movies moving forward. I think we're all agreed, though, that this one was just a fucking fantastic knock out of the park. I know that Jim, you and I have seen it twice. We stepped into it again on our way out of seeing Boy and the Heron the other night, and we rewatched the beginning scene on Odo Island. But we
snuck in for 5 minutes.
We were so tempted just to sit down and just watch the whole rest of the movie again, but it was already late, so we left. But they're extending the run. If we can find this on like a bigger screen than we've seen it on so far, babe, I would totally see it again.
Do they have it in D-Box? Like, which
they do. They do, and I have a friend who saw it in D-Box, and I've never been to a D-Box screening, I think, in my life. I'm not really down for the two gimmicky.
Yeah, but here's...
Right? So I asked him about it. I said, did you like shake all around? Did the seat jerk back during? He says, no, it was really like nothing.
So here's what I would say. If ever you're curious to do a D-Box style experience, which again, I say this having not done it myself, and you're not really sure about the gimmick of it all, why not try it with a movie that you know that you already like and you've already seen 2 other times?
Yeah,
like this is almost like an ideal, like,
scenario.
Right. Yeah. Like, dip your toe in the water. I'm really hoping, like don't some of these like D-Box ones, like the Extreme 4D experience, also like do water effects or something like that? Or
They might. I don't know if they
I'm not
still do.
sure.
I don't know if they
Yeah.
still do.
yeah, I don't know, because that would be kind of cool during some of the water
Yeah.
sequences, as long as they don't like, like drench
Right.
you.
Yeah.
It seems like a maintenance engineer's nightmare.
Somebody
I'm
just
saying.
walks by with a water bottle and spritzes you in the face and just keeps washing.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm gonna hire someone whose only job is to sit next to me in the movie and just be my personal effects guy. Just like,
Perfect.
yeah. Oh, shake my shoulders, Godzilla's on screen. Okay, here's the water bottle. Oh no, there's debris. Here, have
that's
a
fun.
napkin. I don't know.
Yeah, that's fun. All right. Well, listen, two quick comments. We have a whole nother movie to discuss, and we're an hour into the show. But Sam in the chat. Hey, Sam, great to see you. Sam says, I'm glad y'all are doing well. Godzilla was great, and I enjoyed it. I don't want a bad sequel. Let Godzilla destroy stuff.
Yeah.
Definitely.
We're with you on that one.
Definitely.
For sure.
Definitely there,
Yeah.
for sure. And then James says, hey, James, by the way, good to see you, friend. Says, y'all feel it's going to hurt the Godzilla movie coming out by a different company? Can too much Godzilla be bad? So final thought, and then we'll move on over to Miyazaki. But
Yeah.
what do y'all think? Are we hitting Godzilla's saturation point? Is there such a thing? Thoughts?
I don't know. It's hard to say. There will be compare and contrast, obviously, between the movies, but to me they're two totally different. No pun intended. They're two totally different animals, right? I think these movies. I think the Warner Brothers MonsterVerse movies, and of course there's the show on that's on TV now called Monarch, which is kind of supports that whole franchise. That yeah, I don't know that if anything's causing the overexposure, it's that side of things, not the Toho side, if you ask me. But that's kind of where I come down on it.
Yeah, I mean, as with anything, like I personally, it's less a matter of saturation for me and more a matter of, quality. So in this case, what's the new one going to be like by Legendary? The last movie, honestly, I thought Godzilla was the weaker part of the Godzilla Kong part of the last movie. I thought Kong had more stuff to do. Godzilla was tied to characters I liked less. So I think there was some of that. There's still room to course correct that, at least for my tastes. I don't know. I think as long as, those movies weren't hurt. I loved Shin Godzilla, and Shin Godzilla wasn't hurt by the fact that there were other Godzilla movies around it. This one isn't hurt by the fact that there's other other Godzilla movies around it. I just want them to be good, regardless of if there's if we ever get to the point where there's 2 or 3 of these coming out a year, as long as they're good, I don't care.
Yep. Completely agree. I look at it like ice cream flavors. It's all ice cream. Sometimes you want chocolate, sometimes you want strawberry, sometimes you want some motherfucking rocky road. As long as all the flavors taste good.
Yeah.
And
sometimes you want some Miyazaki.
Segue time. Segue. But yeah, great conversation around Godzilla, and thanks to everybody in the live chat. We didn't get to every comment, but great hearing your thoughts. Thanks for being part of the conversation with us. But yeah, we have 20 minutes left to talk about a Miyazaki movie. I have a feeling we're probably going to go more than 20 minutes, and that's okay. But Jim, Will, are you both ready to switch gears from one fantastical Japanese property to another fantastical Japanese property?
Yeah,
I am. This is how I live. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We are going to shift gears and move discussion to The Boy and the Heron. We're going to talk about the film spoiler-free for about 10 minutes before we give you a fair warning and open things up to spoilers. So if you haven't seen The Boy and the Heron yet and you just kind of want to know our initial thoughts, we're happy to give those. But, just listen for that warning and do what you need to do. But all that said, here we go. Our discussion of The Boy and the Heron. All right. Well, I happen to know that you are a devotee of the House of Miyazaki. You love many Miyazaki films, and you were kind of fighting for us to do this one, and kind of a no-brainer. It's a new Miyazaki movie. Of course, we're going to talk about it, but I think that makes you especially fitting to introduce this one, if you don't mind. It's been 10 years since the last Miyazaki movie. Maybe you can just talk little bit about the context here. What is this movie? Why is this a big deal? And what were your thoughts on the film?
So, Hayao Miyazaki is, I think, one of the people that we could definitely call a legendary filmmaker, a legendary animator. His filmography and the legacy that he's built up through now includes some of the just best animated films of all time through his work with Studio Ghibli. Spirited Away is the one that he got his Oscar for, but I mean, you go through pretty much any one of the films: Howl's Moving Castle, Castle in the Sky, Ponyo, My Neighbor Totoro, Kiki's Delivery Service, The Wind Rises, Princess Mononoke, even one of the Lupin movies. This is great across the board. And he retired after making The Wind Rises, which is sort of an autobiographical film, a little bit more grounded and a little bit more about his love of aviation and flying and these things. But he had another story in him, and this is the story that we've got, The Boy and the Heron. Story sort of blends some of his more introspective and sort of mature looks back on his own history, as well as sort of like what he considers to be his legacy, with some of the more exploration of magical worlds and the systems that make those magical worlds that we see in some of his other films. It features this young boy named Mahito, who we find out something tragic happened to his mother. And now he's in this new place with this sort of stepmother type situation with his father, who's working crazy hours at this factory, and he's sort of coming to grips with kind of the new world that he's in and that he kind of wants to escape to. He quite literally finds himself pulled into this other fantastical world that sort of is shared by both the living and the dead, and there he has to forge a way through to rescue someone and then hopefully find his way back out. I mean, this is another one of those. I think, Jim, I'd like to kind of copy what you said during your Godzilla review. You know, it's sort of a no-brainer that someone who is this invested and this in tune with sort of like what Miyazaki's putting down walked away from this movie saying, I absolutely loved it, right? Which makes this a hell of an episode for me to kind of come out of this with just two, absolutely darling films of the year that I get to talk about in the same podcast. The fantastical elements really work. Like, there's stuff that is scary. There's stuff that's weird. There's stuff that's cute and adorable. There's stuff that's magical. There's stuff that's mundane, but seen through a magical lens. But there's also a lot of very mature themes that get explored here. We'll talk a little bit more about what those themes are, but they really do tie into Miyazaki himself and sort of his view as someone who has built this tower of films through the course of his years and is sort of having to look back at, like, what does all of this mean? What does it mean that I built all of these things? And where does it go from here? Where do these stories go from here? I think that's incredibly poignant. This film works both as a narrative within itself and as a meta-narrative outside of itself. And I think that that's something that's fantastic to see a filmmaker who is in tune with his own legacy as much as he is, for someone to make a film that works so well on both angles. Also, I think the Heron was really cool looking in this one. I thought that there was some cool stuff with that character specifically. Now, I did see this one in a subtitled version. So with the Japanese voice actors and subtitled. I know that it has an absolutely stacked American dubbing cast. So I'm very interested in y'all's thoughts on that. But for me, I loved this movie. I think that everyone should go out. What should you go watch this weekend? Go book a double feature of Godzilla -1 and The Boy and the Heron. It's a hell of a thing to do. highly recommend. You'll have a great weekend. So that was my thought. How was the English voice acting? Because that's the part I'm really curious about.
Oh, we'll get into that.
Well, thank you so much for letting us know kind of the context of this film and what you thought about it. Without tipping my hat too much, I'll just say I co-sign the idea of a double feature of these two films.
Yes.
Like them, love them, hate them both. It's a great foray into Japanese cinema, and it's an awesome time to do it. So good suggestion. Jim, if you don't mind, to Will's question, as you talk about your initial thoughts, Will, of course, is alluding to the fact that we saw the dubbed version because the subtitled versions are all at like 10:30 at night here, which we're over 40. That's too fucking late to go see a movie. I'm sorry. I can't do that anymore. So Jim, what was your experience seeing the dubbed version of this with the Hollywood A, B, C level actor list of local talent?
Sure. Yeah, and also to tip my hand a little bit, this just like Godzilla movie, Godzilla -1, which we saw twice, we've seen this movie twice now. And so that kind of tells you that I did really, really, really enjoy The Boy and the Heron, in spite of some potential issues that we can maybe talk through. Will, you talked about the idea of multiple narratives, right? It's standard narrative, like the story narrative, and then the kind of meta narrative, right? And I think this film, in my assessment, I think works better in the meta narrative than it works in the standard narrative. Only because I think the standard narrative is fine and it works, but it might be a little bit difficult to dig into if that's the only thing you're focusing on. In the way this movie is structured, and what happens to the characters and stuff. Let me just start by saying my jaw was on the floor for a lot of this movie. There were a lot of scenes in this movie where you could take a snapshot and that could be like, put it on my wall. Like just a boy wearing pajamas walking through a field of grass, and with the wind blowing and stuff. It was astounding. Just the animation here, man. I mean, we get a lot of animated movies. We get them from Illumination. We get them from Disney Pixar, all that stuff. And they all have their different styles. But I got to say the animation in this film was probably the best animation I've maybe seen on screen since like the early days of Disney, right? The original stuff, like the original Snow Whites and stuff that are restored that look fantastic. This looks great. And so just in that alone, I was mesmerized by this film. But I love the story. I was especially on board with the main narrative, like the first third or so. I will admit that I have struggled in the past with some of Miyazaki's more fantastical elements in his films. That's just me. I just don't. Maybe it's my right brain or left brain that I don't know, whatever. But it kind of misses me sometimes. Like I think that's cool, but like, what does it mean? Like it must have another meaning. And in this case, I was able to catch on, especially in the second screening, I was able to catch on to some of that a lot better. So I think that meta narrative really works when you think about Miyazaki and how closely autobiographical some of this stuff was. A lot of his movies have autobiographical elements, right? But this one, I think, it's a filmmaker, like you said, Will, looking back on his career and his life and kind of putting that all in this film. There are elements of his other films in this film, right? That are kind of referenced in a good way. I really like this movie. I think it's worth seeing. I think do a double feature, do it on back-to-back days if you have to. If you have the money and can see these in a theater, I think it's totally worth it.
All right. Well, Jim, thank you so much for your thoughts as well. Yeah, I mean, just being honest, especially this time of year with it being the holidays, a lot of people are spending a lot of money. So going out to see two movies, might be a little bit of a hardship right now. When you get the chance to catch up with both of these films, please do. I will just add my thoughts about The Boy and the Heron on succinctly. Again, you guys cover a lot of the ground that I probably would. I liked this movie a lot, but I think it really took me 2 viewings of this movie to put certain things in perspective and create some connections for me to help me understand. And what's interesting about this film, I was doing some reading on this. Miyazaki did not want this movie talked about on social media. Miyazaki did not want this movie really promoted very much. Trailers for this movie didn't really come out. In July, it was just boom, there's a new Miyazaki movie. Go see it if you want to. And so for me, this film is less about like, hey, I'm Miyazaki and I made this amazing movie, go see it. And it's more of Miyazaki like almost putting like a statement or like a period at the end of his career. But that said, then I read another thing, he's already planning his next movie. So like I don't know, you know. But
This is only his second retirement, not his third.
I know. This is like the farewell tour, part 25. But you know what? His movies are fantastic. And if he has the passion to keep making them and he feels like he has something still to say, then by all means, Mr. Miyazaki, please keep making these till you're 90, 100, you know, whatever that looks like for you. This is definitely a poignant film. Jim, you mentioned some of the fantastical elements of this. I struggled with that a little bit too. And this is coming from someone who has loved some of the past like fantastical films. Part of my issue, and Kira's making a lot of noise right now. Sorry, that's another issue. Part of my issue is just that, without going into spoilers, this movie doesn't do as good of a job as some of the earlier ones. Like I'm thinking specifically about My Neighbor Totoro. It doesn't do as good of a job about delineating when you're moving from like the real world to the fantastical world, or like within different levels of a fantastical world. And so I found it a little jarring to figure out where I was and what was going on sometimes. Seeing it a second time, I think really helped me kind of figure out the timeline and where we were and what was going on. But watching it for the first time, like at the end, I just turned to Jim. Like there's like a smash cut between two things, and I'm like, how the fuck did we get from there to here? I don't understand. I'm so lost. And then by the time I was done saying that, I'd missed like a minute of more dialogue and things happening. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, I got to see this again. I don't know that that's necessarily the fault of the movie. But I mean, this is a film. It didn't break my top 10 of the year list. It's not one of the best movies that I've seen this year. That doesn't make it a bad movie. It just didn't resonate with me, I think, like a lot of other Miyazaki films have. But it's still worth seeing. It's still very beautiful. The animation is amazing. I think there are some poignant messages about like life and legacy and what you leave behind or not, that resonate with me. But like, I didn't cry. I didn't really laugh much. It didn't really make me feel much. So it's like, while technically it's a good movie, while I was entertained, it didn't move me much. And it's not going to move everybody, and that's okay. But I'm still really glad that I saw it twice.
Yeah, Brad, we didn't answer Will's question.
Yeah, tell me about how
was
Robert
the dubbing?
Pattinson and
the voice acting. Yeah, so definitely some cool voices in here. Dave Bautista, we were sitting there trying to figure out for way longer than we should have. But one of the voices that I was absolutely thrilled to hear pop up was from Karen Fukuhara, who plays on Amazon's The Boys. But I didn't realize this. She's also the voice of Glimmer in the She-Ra revival cartoon from a few years ago. And so she voices one of the characters. And like, I spent the whole fucking movie twice because I forgot to look it up, trying to figure out why I knew that voice so well. And then I looked it up after the second showing and I was like, oh my God, it's fucking Glimmer. But I thought that the voice acting was really good here. Weird to hear American accents, you know, and what is very clearly like a Japanese set film. But I mean, I appreciated the voice acting that we got. It was good.
Yeah, I was really impressed by the voice acting here, right? First of all, I did not know the voice cast going into this movie. So when I looked it up after, I'm like, holy shit. Like we figured out Dave Bautista. and I didn't really catch much of the other ones, but I just thought the way that the voice acting was executed and integrated into the film, when the characters were actually speaking lines and what lines they were speaking, was way better than most dubbed films, right? Where you see just, they get some actors to go, here, read this line and we'll stick it in the movie. Like, it actually felt like it fit to me.
It did.
It really, like, more than any other dubbed movie that I've seen. Will, I would recommend, maybe if you do see it again, try to see the dubbed version, because it is really quite well done. Like, I was super impressed. Not just because of the cat. I mean, Florence Pugh as the dominatrix sushi chef. Like, oh wait, we're not in spoilers yet, are we? Maybe we are.
No, we're not.
Okay.
But Florence Pugh is great. Mark Hamill was fantastic. Really great in this. I guess my only struggle with these dubbed versions is it's like, obviously you're taking a film and like you're having people who are like not of that culture and that setting read for these characters, and I never really know how to feel about that. Like it's taking away from the original voice, you know what I mean? But it's also making the movie more accessible to people who like struggle with subtitles. So it's up to you whether you see it dubbed or subbed. But either way, I think it's definitely a good one.
I will say that, like, I think that historically, at least for me, I'm almost always a subbed, not dubbed kind of guy. But of the Studio Ghibli films are my kind of like my asterisks to that, because they tend to be very well done with the voice cast. That said, I'm looking at the cast here and I'm thinking of the voices of the movie that I just heard. And now I'm trying to say, okay, what does Willem Dafoe sound like as that character? What does Dave Bautista sound like as that character? What does Robert Pattinson sound like as that character? And there's a disconnect in my brain, so I am going to have to see these, because some of these voices, I'm like, like the character that Dave Bautista plays sounds nothing like Dave Bautista. So it's like, I noticed that there's a few people like Tony Revolori, Dan Stevens, Mamadou Athie, who are all like, notable actors who they all just play kind of versions of the same type of character, some parakeet characters that appear.
Right.
And they didn't have they had voice actors, but they they weren't like called out as like special characters, in the dubbed version. I'm sorry, the subbed version. So anyway, all that to say, I do want to watch it in the dubbed version and compare it, because I would really love to see how some of these voices sound in comparison. Because
sure.
Robert Pattinson is the Gray Heron in the subbed version. It is a very like intentionally like obnoxious and rough voice,
gravelly,
right?
Yep. And I wouldn't have known that it was Pattinson. Would not have known.
Oh, okay.
Like,
so
that was one I would not have guessed.
Really?
I wouldn't have.
He did sort of like it was a transform.
He's doing
well, wait, I'm confused, because I thought I saw in the credits today that the Gray Heron was Willem Dafoe.
No, he was the noble pelican, the one that I'll just say noble pelican.
Oh, okay.
He was the pelican one.
He was
different bird.
Okay.
Different bird, same movie.
I got you. Okay. All right. Well, speaking of spoilers, Jim, I don't know if you saw this, but Will asked the question in our private behind the scenes chat. If we had more we wanted to talk about in spoilers, or if we wanted to maybe let this be one of those special rare ones that we don't do spoilers and just let people experience. I'm good either way, but
I think I'm fine with that. Yeah, I'm totally fine with that. I do have more that I want to talk about with this film, and I think I can do it without getting into spoilers.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then, for anybody listening, even though I got a spoiler message ready for the bottom of the screen, we're not going to use it, because we think you should not rob yourself of the experience. You have the ultimate power, but we're not going to enable you to do anything but go see this movie on your own and see what you think. But Jim, you mentioned you had something non-spoiler you still wanted to talk about.
I think one of the things in this film that I might have struggled with a little bit, and again, I gave this movie a really good rating. I really enjoyed this movie, saw it twice, and loved it the second time better. But I struggled a little bit with some of the character motivations, especially near the beginning. Let's just say that. I won't spoil what it is. But when I read a little bit more and learned a little bit more, it comes down to cultural, like there are some cultural, what's the word I'm looking for? Rules, I guess, in Japan around that time before the war, that play into these characters' motivations and kind of what happens in the plot. I'll just say that. Sure. And if you don't understand that, it can leave you scratching your head like, wait, why did this character do that with this other character? I don't think I understand what the motivation is, and why isn't this other character reacting in a certain way? Like it was a little bit weird for me.
I think it's really hard to talk about those things without going into spoilers.
That's okay.
I was having a great conversation with Sam White, friend of the show, which I saw him a few weeks ago in Denver, about both Godzilla -1 and this movie. And he was like, just kind of giving me some of the different context, and there's a whole thing with this movie and like the idea of like legacy and like passing legacy on. And he had some really good insights about how like real things from Miyazaki's life are kind of coded into this film. And if you know those things from his life, you're like, oh, this sequence is totally about this, and this sequence is totally about that. I don't know how to talk about them without going into spoilers, but I love that they're there, and I love that people are picking up on those things and talking about them.
And the other nice thing about this too is that even devoid of those things, there's something special about Miyazaki as a filmmaker where he is not a point A to point B to point C to point D and then credits roll kind of director. He is what I would consider kind of a vibe director, in that his big thing is less so about like, I have to set up all the motivations for this next scene, and then this next scene is going to feed into that, and more just, let's see where the story takes us next, and let's just vibe out along the way, right? That's why Totoro is a fantastic kind of plot light film that you just sort of vibe with. And I think there's big portions of this that do that too. So I think that's, if someone's going into this wondering like, well, do I need to read an autobiography on him first or I need to do that? Nah, just sort of vibe out with Miyazaki and sort of like let him take you through this, magical adventure to this really weird tower and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, like I said, I those cultural things only, again, without getting specific, they might keep a person from understanding kind of what's really going on in the story, or maybe kind of bring somebody out of the movie when they don't understand, or when a character's motivations aren't understood or explained in the film. It just leaves you with a little confusion. But the second, after I read a little bit about it, went in the second time, it totally made sense. I'll just say that. Maybe we.
Well, there you go. See you the second time after you get your questions answered after the first time, and it will recontextualize and reframe. All right. Well, I'm good with leaving it there. I do feel like there's a lot more I want to talk about too, but we can leave it there. Who knows? Maybe if you see it again in dubbed and we see it again in subbed, maybe we'll revisit and do some spoiler talk.
A spoiler segment separately.
Yeah. We could have a segment called Dub the Sub.
There we go. Or sub the dub.
The double-edged sword.
Yeah. Dub the sub.
Nice. But go out and see The Boy and the Heron. We all really liked it. Definitely worth your time. This weekend, relative to when we're recording, Wonka is coming out. And I know we're probably going to talk about that on the show next week. which doesn't excite me, but these are the things I do for y'all because I love
You
you.
never know, Brad.
But if you're looking for something really good to go see this coming weekend that isn't Wonka, again, capitalize on Godzilla -1 while it's still in theaters, and get yourself to The Boy and the Heron. Both are really great films.
Yeah.
Can't really go wrong. So cool. Well, fellas, in case anybody wants to chat with us between now and our next episode, let's let them know how they can connect. Jim, where can people find you?
You can find me on Letterboxd when it comes to movies at JJP Out West. You can see my ratings and my mini reviews for both of these movies out there, and see see the movies and then check out reviews, which is sometimes what I do. I try to hold off on reading reviews on movies until after I've actually reviewed it, because I don't really want to be influenced, but it's hard. It's hard, out there in Twitter to see people's reactions and not get pushed one way or the other. But yeah, check me out on Letterboxd at JJP Out West, and I'm still on Facebook at Jim Pugliafico. My name.
All right,
here.
Thank you, babe. Well, how about you? Where can people find and connect with you, friend?
Girl, let me see that MySpace.
Yeah.
No, I'm on the socials. You can find me on Facebook. That's, look for William Lindis. That's where I'm at most of the time. I'm on TikTok and Blue Sky at the Movie Bear, and Instagram. Letterboxd is one that I enjoy doing quite a bit with, and have had sort of an uptick in sort of like press and promo screenings the last couple of months, which has been great because I've got a chance to see a couple things before they've come out. So I've got reviews up both on our Movie Bears podcast website and socials, and on my Letterboxd for some things coming out soon. Poor Things, which just came out, All of Us Strangers, which is the new Andrew Haig movie coming out around Christmas, and I've got one coming up pretty soon for the new George Clooney, The Boys in the Boat. So check out reviews and socials and say hi and talk movies. Let's just do all of that.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Will. And you can find me on Facebook. I'm the Brad Harris, who likely has bear, chub, chaser, dolphin, wolf, cub, alligator. I don't even know.
Squirrel, cheetah.
Friends in common with you. Feel free to please just send me a message before a friend request and let me know you're from the show. You can also find me on Letterboxd, where guys,
Yeah.
in 17, 18 something days, I will have completed an entire year of rating every film I've seen on Letterboxd. Will, that was a personal challenge that you issued to me. You slapped me in the face with a glove to cement the seriousness. Or maybe I just wanted that to happen. I don't know. But I've been rating everything, and I'll tell you what, friend, it's so nice to be able to just like tap two things and see my top 10 of the year. That'll be so great for our episode in January, where we go to our top 10s, because in years past I've had fucking spreadsheets and I'm trying to remember what I thought about movies, and now it's just super easy and magical. So I'm looking forward to that for sure. But friends, feel free to add me, follow me, whatever you want to call it, on Letterboxd. My handle there is at iBradPro. It has been a pleasure hanging out with y'all in the live chat. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, relative to when we're recording, of course. It is coming up on Christmas time for us. So just a heads up for you with regards to our schedule. We are going to be back with you next week on 12/19. Our current plan is a review of Wonka. We'll see if we stick to that. I'm pretty sure we will, but you never know. But the week between Christmas and New Year's, we are out of the podcast studio, FYI. Everyone's going to be spending time with families and doing holiday stuff probably anyway. So we're going to take that week off, and then we'll be back on Tuesday, 1/2, the first show of 2024, with a holiday catch up. All the movies that we're going to see over that Christmas week, we're going to catch up with those, and I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about when we come back. So just be aware of that schedule coming, and we will see you all next time. Thanks for tuning in. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.